Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, dear participants. Thank you for joining us today as we address a matter of utmost urgency and significance. We have been witnessing these days the escalating effects of climate change and the worsening impacts, as I say, and the continued unfolding from unprecedented heat waves seen this year to devastating flood and lasting wildfires, etc. So with this, we also need to discuss solutions, and we do know which the solutions are, and we must...
Bonjour. Donc, c'est pour ça nous discuter des solutions et essayer de donc le projet de zéro de carbone, ça sera très chaud de la climatique. Donc, tous les métiers
International Energy Agency and CCAC underscores a fundamental truth. We must concurrently pursue the reduction of both methane and carbon
le climatique va chaud.
To keep a stable climate.
Donc,
neither methane action nor carbon dioxide
si on a laissé le carbone et le deuxième oxyde de carbone. Donc,
the oil and gas sector has some of the strongest opportunities of all of rapid reductions.
De le gaz, ils ont chance que utiliser le méthane donc il y a beaucoup de méthane, de gaz méthane, qu'on ne peut laisser au moins cher, moderne. Donc, ça c'est très important. Dans cette région, il y en a 10 pays de cette région qui accordent sur l'accord de gaz de méthane. Je pense que 20% jusqu'à 2030. Donc,
according to the report I just mentioned, targeted methane cuts in fossil fuel methane could avert 1 million premature deaths a year due to ozone exposure, 90 million tons of crop loss,
le méthane,
85 billion hours of lost labor due to heat exposure by 2030, providing roughly
je pense que
$260
elle
billion
morte millions de personnes.
And these benefits come at minimal cost
Millions de personnes.
for the
Et
oil and gas industry.
les arbres
And
aussi.
International Energy Agency has
Malheureusement.
calculations that pursuing all available abatement options
Donc,
by 2030 would cost less than 3% of the industry's 2022.
l'Agence de l'énergie nationale.
This is an investment we cannot afford to pass up. We know what we need to do to realize the climate goals and meet the objectives of the global methane pledge. But we need more data on how we unlock those emission reductions. This is where UNEP
On connaît
comes in,
qu'est-ce
and
qu'on
where
va faire
actors across the region
pour
can engage as
cette
well.
situation.
I'm talking about UNEP International Methane Observatory that
Je
provides
parle
open, reliable, and actionable data
source
to the
unit
individuals positioned to reduce
qui
emissions.
envoie
It draws on academic
des
research,
informations
satellite
vraies,
systems, countries and
donc il y
companies
a
to
beaucoup de
provide a trusted source
messages,
for transparency. So
il y a
UNEP's
beaucoup de
science
choses
studies
que
are improving our shared understanding
différences.
of where emissions are coming from and where the solutions should be. One such study is set to take place in Oman.
Ça c'est
and
clair pour nous.
the first
C'est quoi le problème et c'est quoi le...
independent study of oil and gas methane emission.
Donc Oman, ils ont
And through this observatory, there is
étudié
also the methane alert and response,
des
which leverages satellite data to identify
situations
major methane leaks and notify
et donner
companies and
les
countries
solutions.
where to take action. It's a prime example of the type of direct data to action.
Donc il faut
We are
que
connecting stakeholders
chercher
across the region.
sources d'eau.
We are also hoping that additional oil and gas producers, particularly state-owned oil and gas companies, join UNEP's
Donc,
oil and gas and methane partnership
notre travail
2.0
de produire
and adopt the protocols needed
oil
to drive methane reduction
et le gaz.
through rigorous monitoring,
On va travailler
reporting,
ensemble
and
pour
So as we lead to COP28, companies and countries must
prendre des solutions.
match their methane ambition with action. And UNEP is committed to providing the partnership and framework to help realize that vision.
Des solutions de
And
notre
I hope that the discussions by this great panel today
situation.
will somehow prove what I'm saying here. And now I leave you with the next speaker to provide a keynote speech. Dr.
Il y a d'autres discours.
Thank you.
Il y a d'autres discours qui parlent.
Thank you, Miriam. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Merci, Mariam.
Good morning, colleagues.
Bonjour, mesdames et
Before I
messieurs.
begin, Dr. Abdullah Malik from the COP28 Energy
Je m'appelle Abdullah
team,
Malik
head of the energy transition.
et je suis
before
du
I begin, I
chauffeur
would like to thank the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for hosting
au
the
COP
Climate Week, which really
d'Amérique.
demonstrates the Saudi leadership into
Et je
addressing the climate change.
remercie
And I
l'Arabie
would also
Saoudite
like to thank the Ministry of Energy
pour
for
cet
its
événement
great hospitality. I would also like to thank
et
the
le
organizers
ministre
for this dialogue, which focuses
d'énergie
on a critical subject that actually bring along
en Arabie Saoudite.
a lot of opportunities. So, ladies and gentlemen,
Donc,
here is the challenge that we are facing today.
mesdames et messieurs,
All the indicators are telling us that we have to change course
je
to
parle
address climate challenge. The IPCC
faire.
has calculated that the world must reduce
il
emissions
faut
by at
que
least
changer
43%
de
by 2030
ICC
within the next 7 years
et
to stay within
l'émission
the 1.5
moins
degrees warming. And this is our North Star.
43
This is our destination. It is simply respecting the science.
et
And
jusqu'à
we
la
must do
demi.
this
Donc,
while we also ensure human prosperity by meeting the energy needs of the planet's growing population. In fact, what we need is a system-wide
vivre,
holistic transformation of entire economies. There is a key area
pour,
that we
bon
believe can
vivre.
have the biggest impact in the shortest period of time, which is simply curbing methane emissions. As we heard this morning, the MENA region clearly recognizes the importance of abating methane emissions.
Comme
With
on
10
dit,
MENA countries
déjà,
already signed up for the
il
global
y a
methane pledge.
10
And several
10 pays
MENA-based companies are already
qui
members of the Oil
accordent,
and Gas Methane Partnership, OGMP 2.0.
moyens
And we call on all MENA
le
countries
gaz
and companies to
de
support
méthane.
such great
Donc,
initiatives and the
notre,
wider UN efforts under the International Methane Emissions
nous sommes,
Observatory and the Climate and Clean Air Coalition
de le pays
that
MENA.
help building capacity for developing domestic policy and regulations that will enable abatement of methane emissions. Ladies and gentlemen, according to the latest IEA studies, around 20% of the anthropogenic methane emissions are coming from the oil and gas sector. And a recent study by S&P found that focused action in 6 target regions could deliver 40 billion cubic meter of incremental natural gas to global markets in less than 3 years. And actions include investments in leak detection, measurement, valves, and basic infrastructure. Capturing this 40 billion cubic meter of lost methane and natural gas would take out 750 million tons CO2 equivalent, an amount approximately the size of Germany's total annual emissions. This would be a major leap in advancing the global methane pledge. And expanding beyond the 3 years time frame, actions could capture 80 billion cubic meter of lost methane and natural gas that is currently flared, with positive economic returns, and at worst, near zero net costs. Here I would like to share with you a quick story. So back in the 1978 in the UAE, we have passed a law that bans any
Donc en Émirats, il y a un rôle
LNG export from the region was not such a thing. So it made the first LNG export to exist, and today it's actually supporting the abatement of the strategy in the UAE. And we are excited also to hear that here in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the entire Jubail industrial city was established to utilize the methane that has been flared in the past. So there are actually economic opportunities from methane. And I will let my colleagues here to share more light into Aramco's chance économique. So, je veux laisser le mic pour mes amis au SABC ou l'autre. And our key takeaways from those engagements only reinforced our conviction about the central importance of inclusivity. Everyone must be at the table to make the transformational progress needed, and especially the energy industry. That's why in Sarah Week, back in March, we have called on all IOCs and NOCs to step up and align around the net zero by or before 2050, as well as eliminating routine flaring and methane emissions by 2030. And we are pleased to say that today, over 20 oil and gas companies, both IOCs and NOCs, have positively answered our call. And this took time and effort and many months of negotiations and collaboration. And we urge everyone to make this commitment at COP28, a COP where we call on everyone to set the highest ambitions, follow through the practical actions, and deliver the results. Thank you.
Vous pochez des bons résultats.
Dr. Malik, for those opening remarks.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Malik.
My name is James Morris, and I'm from the Climate and Clean
Je
Air
m'appelle
Coalition
James
Secretariat, hosted
Morris.
by UNEP, and I'm going to be facilitating the panel discussion here today. And just a reminder of the objectives of this session. We're really here to discuss the strategies, challenges, and opportunities for reducing methane emissions, to highlight the importance of accountability and transparency, as well as the need for regulation to drive down emissions. We also want to discuss how to support methane reductions in other regions through finance, technology transfer, capacity building, and other means of implementation. We've heard also about the Global Methane Pledge, and just to recall, this is really guiding a lot of this work with its collective global goal of reducing 30% of methane emissions by 2030 from 2020 levels. 150 countries had signed on by the last COP in Egypt, and 10 of those from the MENA region. This has catalyzed a lot of action and momentum, and there are many mechanisms and resources available to support governments, particularly including through the Climate and Clean Air Coalition, the International Methane Emissions Observatory, the Global Methane Initiative, International Energy Agency. I want to put on the slides, just one slide I want to show to you. I think I've got the control here, maybe. Oh. There it is. So I want to also stay short in my introduction, so I want to just make this quick, important announcement. So on behalf of the International Energy Agency, the Climate and Clean Air Coalition, and UNEP, we're launching this report that you see on the screen today entitled The Imperative of Cutting Methane from Fossil Fuels. There's a QR code so you can download it, and the official launch will actually take place at the end of this event, so you'll see that coming online. And just to give you a quick summary, and Miriam mentioned some of the findings at the beginning in the opening remarks, but even in a scenario in the fossil fuel sector where we're doing everything we can do to decarbonize, we still have to do everything we can to reduce methane emissions. Without targeted action on methane, the increase in global temperature will likely exceed 1.6 degrees Celsius by 2050. Methane mitigation measures are readily available in the fossil fuel sector, most of them without any cost or at low cost, and this amounts to less than 2% of the profits that oil and gas companies made last year. So there's an economic value to taking action, and this is all the more compelling when you factor in the public health and food security benefits from reduced tropospheric ozone or smog. As you may know, methane is a precursor to this. And there are also labor cost impacts from working at higher temperatures. So there's an imperative for methane action, and as you'll see in the last bullet on the screen, this includes appropriate regulatory frameworks as well as ramped up investment in mitigating methane. So I'm going to leave my remarks there. You can download the report if you can catch the QR code in the background, and we'll need to do follow-up sessions on that report in more detail in the future. I want to introduce our panelists very briefly. We have panelists from the government of Iraq, the International Finance Corporation, SABIC, Aramco, and the Clean Air Task Force.
Je veux discuter avec mes amis.
We've got a very short amount of time. I'm just going to launch straight into the panel discussion. And I'd like to start with Mr. Youssef, Youssef, the Director of Climate Change from the Ministry of Environment in Iraq, and pose you a couple of questions for your remarks. So really interested to hear what are the main challenges and opportunities that Iraq faces in meeting your methane reduction targets in the oil and gas sector, as well as how you were able to build consensus across the government for the targets that were in your revised NDC. And if you can also talk to some of the support you've got for regulatory development, that would be welcome as well. Over to you.
Qu'est-ce que vous faites ou va faire à l'aventure? Bonjour à tous. J'ai discuté au Irak. C'est quoi le défi?
We must focus about the oil and gas sector. About methane, Iraq, when we prepared this NDC document, it's included, this is the 4 paragraph mentioned about this, the methane, how can the Iraq implementing this NDC document.
Le climatique va chaud.
Also now we continue for prepare this the NAMA document, the mitigation plan of Iraq. Now we have this the final draft. Document will included. This is the chapter about how can this Iraq reduction of the greenhouse gases.
Le méthane.
Of course, now we have a good cooperation and understanding from the Ministry of Oil in Iraq about we must start a new project. The Ministry of Oil start about that. Now we have this many proposal. Maybe the next in the COP28 in Dubai, the Ministry of Oil will announce about this a new project, investment, a new project dealing about the methane. When we talking about the challenges, we talking about this the gap in the capacity building of technical staff in the Ministry of Oil. We also talking about this the gap in the technology. But also about technology, now we have this the technology need assessment document with CTC, and now we have a good progress about complete it. But when we start, we must start by complete. This is a document already. The NDC included methane, NAMA, technology. This is the document. Already we will submit it to UNFCCC. About this national document, now the Ministry of Oil updating the national plan of the energy in Iraq, and included also chapter focus about this, the investment in methane. When we also talking about how can this the consensus of this the Iraqi government of the NDC, we talking about this is the energy. How can this the Iraq benefit from to $2.5 billion if we have the new project investment in the flaring and the flaring and the methane, especially the Iraq accession to initiative from the World Bank about this the zero flaring until 2030. Also now we have a good cooperation with the UN environment about this the global methane analysis. We have this the new vision about that. We talking about the Iraqi government focus about this the three area about this the reduction of the methane. We talking about the energy. We talking about the economic impacts, also about the health impacts, especially in the south of Iraq. Also about the electricities, we can increase our capacity if we can investment the flaring and methane to increase the capacity to 10 gigawatt per year if we can implementing a new project about that. Also, when we thinking about our vision about update the NDC Iraq in the 2025, when we talking about the increased emissions, this is the emissions dependent on this is our progress in implementing this the project, especially in the methane. Now we will complete this second communication in Iraq, and included this the inventory of this, the many greenhouse gases, and included methane. After that, we will prepare this the MRV system, and we can follow up with what the progress about the methane. Also, maybe in the next week or next month, we will start a new project with the CCAC about this the assessment of methane in Iraq. We talking about this is the main issue when we're talking now about the reduction of methane. Talking about this a new concept in the Iraqi economy. For that, this is our vision about when we're talking about this the government really. Now we have this the political and technical war. For start about this investment in the flaring, in the investment in the flaring and in the methane. Also not in the methane, maybe now we focus about this the oil and gas sector. Also we focus about this investment in methane, the energy and the municipalities and the agriculture sector. But we will focus on the first step about this the oil and gas sector.
That's really useful and interesting, and I'd also just highlight what our colleague from UNAP, Miriam, mentioned in the opening, that there are different types of support mechanisms out there for governments who are wishing to take action, including through the CCAC for tailored support for governments on policies and regulations, but also through the International Methane Emissions Observatory for courses and trainings on MRV like you were discussing. Okay, thank you very much. International Finance Corporation. So Mr. John Morkos is a Senior Investment Officer and Regional Sustainable Finance Lead, Infrastructure Department for the Middle East, Central Asia, Turkey, Afghanistan and Pakistan. And I'd like to pose just two questions for you, kind of big, broad questions. But what is the IFC and maybe by extension the World Bank Group doing to support rapid cuts in methane emissions from the oil and gas sector? And if you could provide one or two examples of financing from the MENA region, that would be great too. Over to you.
Sure. Thank you, James, and I hope you can hear me okay. So I think the way to look at this is a few years ago, the World Bank started putting together what we call CCDRs. These are country climate development reports which try to really put climate at the center of development paths for the countries where we work in. And that's an essential tool because it serves as a basis for diagnosis really for countries to try to get them on a greener path for the future. So you have, I guess, messages in there, climate adaptation, climate resilience, and so on and so forth. So about 25 or so countries have now received their CCDRs. And I know that Mr. Youssef worked on the one for Iraq, so I had the pleasure of working on it myself. And hopefully with the next 4 to 5 years, all of the countries that are subject to World Bank Group support will have completed these CCDRs. And what it does, it brings together the World Bank, IFC, but other stakeholders, United Nations organizations, but also governments to help guide their policy-making initiatives, the private sector, of course, and the global audience. I mean, but what I'll do is I'll spend a bit of time on a case study in Iraq, and I'm really happy that Mr. Youssef is next to me. So Iraq is the world's second largest gas flaring country worldwide after Russia. To give you an idea of size, roughly about 17.5 million cubic meters of flared gas per year. So that's quite a significant amount of associated gas that's released into the atmosphere. So of course that's very, very bad for the environment, but it's also a source of budget deficit for Iraq, because despite being amongst the top 20 countries in the world in terms of gas reserves, Iraq has to import gas for its energy needs. So it is imperative, for Iraq to try to mitigate this problem, not just environmentally, but also for financial purposes. So we, as part of the CCDR, we came up with a list of suggestions, which looked at 3 verticals, really. One is energy, the other is water and transport. And what we concluded is roughly $223 billion worth of investments are needed for Iraq by 2040 to really help Iraq meet its development goals. And out of that, the energy sector, you agree? Right. So roughly about 75% of Iraq's total carbon emissions are attributed to the energy sector. And specifically, flaring, venting, and power generation are sources of 60% of Iraq's emissions. So it's very critical for them to try to minimize this. What we calculated is roughly in 2020, the flaring of natural gas represented a loss of $2.5 billion worth of revenue. So it's very, very significant. And when you look at the report, you see we've broken down what the Iraqis should do, at least from our perspective, in terms of the targets from the energy sector. And you mentioned, to give you an example of what the IFC or the World Bank Group has done to try to help reduce methane or gas flaring in general. So Iraq was one of the first countries in the world to actually join the GGFR, which Mr. Youssef mentioned, and you mentioned yourself, the Global Gas Flaring Reduction Initiative. And I think they joined the initiative, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, in 2011. And 2 or 3 years later, there's a special purpose vehicle which was set up as a joint venture between the Iraqi Ministry of Oil, Shell, and Mitsubishi. It's called Basra Gas Company. It's one of the world's largest gas flame reduction initiatives. And what we did in 2011, we, as IFC, provided financing to the tune of $360 million. So we provided money from our own pocket, but we also mobilized finance from commercial banks, as well as co-investors from what we call our MCPP program. That's a co-lending program that IFC has initiated a number of years ago. So we're very proud of this initiative, and it's been 2.5 years now that we put this loan into the BGC venture. And I just want to give you an idea, in terms of the size of the methane emission reductions that this project would do. So when we invested, the BGC venture had roughly 1 billion scf per day worth of raw gas processing capacity. And the aim within the end of our loan is that the processing capacity would increase to 1.4 billion scf per day worth of raw gas processing capacity. So to give you an idea, the raw gas equivalent when the project would be fully implemented and operational at 1.4 billion scuffs per day is equivalent to 8 or 9 gigawatt worth of power generation. So it's very, very significant. And in terms of the reduction of emissions, it's roughly 30 million tons of CO2 equivalent per year. That's a little bit less than the total emissions of Denmark or New Zealand.
Va produire moins de gaz de méthane, moins que 9 de 8 gigatonnes. Donc, il est très important projet. Alors, ça va avoir que les technologies existent. Et alors, chaque pays qu'ils ont besoin d'énergie, ils vont capables. Et c'est ce que je fais. Merci. Et vous allez dire de différentes sources d'énergie et comment c'est capable de mieux le climat. Et il va être très mieux, mais j'ai deux questions pour vous. Comment vous voulez faire et comment votre campagne pour produire le méthane aussi. Merci, Monsieur James. Le méthane, l'utilisation, on utilise beaucoup aux différents. Le méthane, normalement, une utilisation pour l'opération de produire pour l'hydrogène et le gaz. Et c'est très important. Mais le méthane aussi, mélangé avec l'autre chimical matériel et aussi pour le produit d'ammonia, pour l'utiliser aussi pour source d'énergie. Et autre et aussi on peut l'utiliser comme une gasoline aussi. Le produit de méthane, c'est une opération et comment on peut le sourcer et le trouver. Mais les gaz de méthane qui sont esquipés, et comme c'est esquipé de compresseurs, et d'autres secteurs aussi, donc il y a plus façon de perdre de méthane en l'air. Mais il y a des appareils qui trouvent le méthane qui sont esquipés. Mais on a aux États-Unis aussi, il y a plus que 50%, pardon, 15% d'autres matériels aussi. Et c'est ça la technologie pour trouver pour les gasolines et le gaz méthane qu'ils ont skippé. Mais il y a autre aussi utilisation pour le gaz de méthane. Et aussi le source de chauffer pour le futur et comment vous voulez utiliser au chauffage et aussi pour l'utilisation de faire de l'énergie et la source d'électricité, tout ça entre dans le plan. Mais quand on a dit au méthane, c'est le produit le plus important pour le produit au futur. Et comment on va faire pour dépayer le méthane de l'utilisation pour le réchauffement de bâtiments. Et alors, il va avoir de l'énergie et du produit. Et tout ça, il va aider le mémoire de méthane qu'ils ont skippé. Et ça, ce qu'on s'appelle là, qui est bien approuvé, qu'on va mémoire de méthane en l'air. Et ce, peut-être, va être possible pour produire mais de méthanol aussi, de hydrogène. Et alors, c'est ça tout important pour produire du méthane et le méthanol. Et je suis content pour écouter tout ce que ce produit. Et maintenant, M. Skandar, qu'il travaille avec Aramco. Qu'est-ce qu'il fait Aramco aussi pour ce challenge? Et c'est quoi le plus important chose pour produire less de pollution? Oui, nous sommes avec Aramco de Arabie Saoudite et on a plein de projets et plein de... Et on est focusé sur l'énergie pour que se pousser le développement global. Et aussi, si on a parlé de l'histoire de Aramco aussi, comme on dit M. Abdullah, comme elle dit, le commencement de discours, dans les années 99, et on a commencé de on a bien besoin d'utiliser le gaz qui sont produits, comme par exemple le Jubel et tous les global, et comment pas produire et prendre le moyen de l'utilisation de méthane aussi. Et comment pour parce que ça, il va aider tout le global et l'humanité aussi. Mais c'est le produit, quand on trouve le pétrole et le méthane, il faut qu'on travaille ensemble avec l'autre secteur comme l'énergie. pour que mais moins de carbone et moins de pollution. Et maintenant, comme l'année 95, quand on a commencé l'utilisation de le gaz, on a bien laisse moins de gaz perdu. On va travailler jusqu'à le pourcent va être à 0%. Et aussi, c'est important pour utiliser et fabriquer de l'énergie et le produire. Et ça, c'est Aramco qui fait pour le fabriquer. Et comment on va faire avec le gaz et comment on doit le pas brûler aussi. Et aussi, et quand on regarde et comment on va avec la technologie et comme on a dit aussi, on va mettre moins de carbone au l'air. Et tout ça, il était prouve qu'on a déjà commencé à mettre moins de pollution. Donc, on a plus de solutions et comparé de ce qu'on a commencé avec. Et ça, c'est plus prouvé que quand on va découvrir plus de gaz, on va faire attention. Comment on va faire pour réparer aussi? Et on va bien mettre des informations pour comment, quand on brûle du gaz, mais quand on met l'est de méthane aussi, il y a plus de challenges pour les campagnes comme de l'Arabie Saoudite, Aramco. Qu'ils ont besoin de sources et pour les carbone. Et ça, c'est trouve le challenge que nous allons à. Et il faut bien approuver l'erreur qu'on trouve, mais cette pollution est comme de moins de personnes et c'est très petite personne de pollution. Mais il faut le regarder pour trouver la source de l'erreur et voir. On voulait préparer. Il va beaucoup aider en ce secteur. Si on a ça pour la troisième question, il n'y a pas un seul solution, il faut avoir plusieurs façons de le mettre moins de méthane en l'air. C'est très important aussi, toutes les façons qu'on avait dit. Et aussi, pour l'utilisation, le sensor pour détecter le gazole qu'ils ont escapé au l'air.
Il
va être bien plus d'informations et moins d'informations de détecter de pollution.
There is a financial investment and there is also a manpower investment. When you compare, for example, the LDAR, it's a device that has to be held by
Il faut investir aussi aux personnes et dans la personnalité qu'ils vont ramener de l'information. Et alors, comme on dit, il y a des technologies, mais il y a aussi de l'employé qu'ils vont faire. Et c'est que va mis de l'année prochaine, au futur. Donc, on va l'utiliser pour trouver s'il y a du gaz skippé. Et alors, le pourcentage qu'ils ont maintenant, c'est très petit pourcentage. Mais on va aller jusqu'à 0%. Et merci pour tout. Merci pour cette information de Aramco Arabie Saoudite. Et pour que je vous ai dit pour comment vous allez faire. Et on va maintenant aller pour c'est madame qui travaille au nord de l'Afrique. C'est quoi le source qui protégeait cette mission que vous allez avoir? Je suis content d'être ici avec vous pour ce climat, le semaine de climat. Et je vois aussi cette mission qu'on a maintenant. Et par rapport aux sources qu'ils ont sur mission, on a essayé d'aller jusqu'à le 0%. Et à la fin, tout le monde a besoin d'utiliser tout ce qu'on a. Mais moins de gaz de moutarde, le gaz de methane aussi, c'est le plan. Et toutes les sources qu'ils ont dit, il faut mettre moins de gaz méthane jusqu'à 2030. Je suis content d'entendre ça. Et je suis content de parler de ce discours aussi. Et aussi pour le pétrole et le gasoline. Qui vient de pétrole au gaz aussi. Il faut travailler ensemble et mettre de rôle et pour comment on va faire avec le gasoline. Et je suis ici avec le plus grand produit pour le produit de l'énergie aussi. Et comme M. Sultan a dit, il faut qu'on arrive aux solutions et bien autres solutions aussi. Il est bon pas pour le futur.
operations, and we don't have time, we can't wait. So this
Et
is going
aussi,
to
on n'a
require
pas beaucoup de temps pour
the
le
industry to
CIDO,
get behind these solutions and
mais
start to demonstrate that leadership role. And it's
cette
less
année,
about debating how much
on va
fossil
prendre
fuel is
le
going to be part
conduire
of
au
the future
futur.
energy system, but it's about looking at the low-hanging fruit that we have today. This is good business practice. We do need policies, we do
Et
need
on a
regulations, but also calling on
beaucoup de
industry
choses
to
pour
take that
prouver,
leadership role. We
pour
can't
prendre
wait
ce
for
fruit.
the regulations to catch up. We know how to do these. It is
Et
good
on ne
business
peut pas
practice.
attendre
We know as
plus
well that methane has been
pour
responsible
le
for around
faire.
30% rise in
Et
global temperature since
marcher avec
the Industrial
les
Revolution.
règles
We have the technologies ready to go today
pour
to do that. So
comment on va
also to
faire
your question on
et
what is it we
avec
would
autre
like to
façon.
see next coming out of COP. We'd want NOCs to join the OGMP, the coalition of companies overseen by UNEP, designed to improve data quality and emission
On aimerait bien,
we want companies to be taking an absolute reduction
on
target
travaille
in
avec l'autre
intensity,
campagne
recognize the gains in efficiency,
pour
and
mémoire,
also working with in partnership
produire
on policies to deploy that.
et travailler avec
And
aussi
then just a little bit about
les personnes qui
beyond that,
sont
we want the
de
NOCs
choix
to really,
et les
NOC
décisions.
participation is going to be really critical. A lot of the world's oil and gas consumption
Elle
is
va
outside
être
the OECD,
sur
and that
opération,
share is only
ça va
projected to
être
grow in the
très
future.
important.
So we need the NOCs and the IOCs to really get behind these solutions and put forward to be part
Donc,
of
on a
the
bien
solution.
besoin
So CATF's work
de
on methane,
trouver des
we were
solutions,
involved in,
plusieurs
helping to
solutions.
the pledge at the UK COP26. We've been encouraging the European Commission to launch the pledge, the Biden administration.
Pour les
We've been doing outreach to government, education
Européens
with
unis,
governments, capacity building, and that's really helping to generate this momentum.
il faut avoir plus
Now it's about the implementation of that, developing the policies, improving inventory
dans le
estimates,
gouvernement
developing those
de
regulatory
être
frameworks,
plus
building
de
capacity at the institutional
façons
level
et
as
plus
well.
de solutions et comment on
We at
va
CATF, we collaborate
réparer
with NOCs throughout Latin America, Africa, and elsewhere
cette
to build
situation.
capacity and deepen that understanding of
Mais
both
on a
emissions and the solutions.
le
And
latin
prime pathways
américain
towards mitigation. So
et
we've
les
conducted,
États-Unis,
joint leak detection
ils ont déjà
surveys,
commencé
workshops, on optical gas imaging and
et on a
inventory
travaillé
development
avec
for
eux
NOC staff, collaborating in developing
et
policies to
comment
address
faire pour
methane
le
emissions. We've
travail
been working with the Iraqi government as well on
qu'ils
supporting
sont
that, as
bien
well as
d'accord
others
avec
throughout
l'autre
Ecuador,
gouvernement
and Latin America. So I think really
et
with
sont
COP28,
mais
it's
plus
about the industry
de
now being seen as part of the
power de
solution,
rumeurs
picking the
pour
low-hanging
faire le
fruit that we have and really demonstrating that leadership role.
produire
Finally,
moins
those
less.
NOCs and IOCs that are already deploying these solutions and moving, it
Et
really
si-
is about collaboration and sharing that leadership,
Et alors,
that
il faut être
capacity, best practices,
d'accord
helping other
et va aider
industry actors to get
ensemble pour
along to the same level as where we are seeing those positive movements already happening.
et pour
And then finally,
faire
it
tout ce que
really is
le
in
plan
terms of
ou le
resolving this
temps qu'on
climate,
a mettre.
challenge, we do need to see collaboration, and
Et
that starts
le
with the industry,
problème
that
de
starts with
réchauffement
governments,
du
across
climat,
industries, the finance sector.
je dois
So
avoir
it's
plus
really
de
about that
temps
sharing of best practices
avec le
and,
compagnie
policy
et les
development.
autres productions
Thank you very
pour
much. That's
le
really
dire.
useful, and I think we can pick up on your last point.
Merci
and
beaucoup.
commit from the Climate and Clean Air Coalition, at least, to work with you and everyone else to
Alors,
continue
on
this
apprend
conversation,
bien
because I think there's a lot more
info-
to unpack and to explore
bonne
together, and
information
also to share
de
in
ce que
terms of
vous
best
allez
practices.
faire
So we can do that virtually, perhaps, in the lead up
et
to
comment
COP,
vous
and
allez
then,
faire
through some
avec
surveys
cette
as well.
situation.
We've heard a lot of different views that we're coming to the end of the
Et
session, but I want
avec
to give
beaucoup
Dr. Malek,
de
a closing
opinions
word.
aussi.
Over to you.
Thank you.
On
Thank
a
you, James. I
commencé
promise I will
de
not take more than the 5 minutes
arriver
of
à
the
la
keynote speech, but
terminer. Alors, on va écouter le dernier
I'd like to make some reflections about what
mot.
we heard this morning. So I will start with what Olivia
Je
mentioned.
crois que ce que vous allez dire ici,
Before starting, how much time do I have?
et alors,
30 seconds. Okay, I'll make it very quick then. So we fully
alors
echo
j'ai
the message
30%
from Olivia that
3 secondes, pardon,
issued by
pour
IEA
le
is
dire,
actually
le rapport.
is something helping us in shaping our thinking. So this is not the first
Et
report.
ça, ce
Many
rapport
reports have been
va
issued this year, and
nous
it
aider
has been instrumental in how we actually call for raising an ambition. And the Clean Air Task Force
et
has been
comment
also very
on
helpful.
va le faire.
In fact, it was our first engagement with organizations.
Et comme on
It
dit,
helped us
comment
understand the size of the issue
le
and where we should focus.
équipe
On
qui
the example
travaillait
from
va le
MENACW
faire
and
aussi.
IFC, this is a great successful story that we are
Et
actually
comme
trying
monsieur
to
que
replicate.
vient
I'm not
de
saying this
Irak
because
a
of
dit,
gentlemen here,
et
but
l'autre monsieur,
we are actually trying
je
to
suis
replicate this model to
d'accord.
support other NOCs getting
Et
into
nous
the
aussi,
methane
on fait la même
So,
chose
we are working
dans
closely
l'autre
with the World
pays.
Bank because there was, I think, a
Et
tripartite
alors,
effort
nous
to
allons
ensure
avoir de savoir de comment faire avec le banque
and I think
global.
it's important to highlight that in our thinking we are focusing on the.
Il faut avoir de mettre.
All right, I know there's. I see it's 0
Il y a,
seconds, but just quickly on what's happening.
il y a de sound
We are
qui
focusing
vient
on
avec
the
le
energy
produit.
opportunity from abating methane, but converting it into chemicals that brings a lot of value. So
Et on
there's
a deux
actually
façons
bigger
de parler
opportunity
de
that
methane.
sees with, although it might require more investments, but then the
Et
return is
comment on
much
va
higher.
faire
So
avec.
this is a great opportunity to actually
Alors, c'est
lower
bonne
the
chance
emissions and get back on track of the
pour
1.5
mes mois de
And to the
carbone.
point from our colleagues from Aramco, they
Et
mentioned
pour ce point qu'on a
density is
déjà
0.05.
dit,
Just for comparison, today
mais,
the average is 0.36.
mais
So that's
le pourcent qu'on a
5 or 6 times
approuvé de le faire, c'est
And our ask for colleagues from the bank is
0,5%.
to replicate and actually go around
Et
and
le
speak with
pourcentage
NOCs,
au gasoline,
NOCs
au
in the
Aramco,
region and
c'est
globally
moins less
to
de
share best
l'autre
practice and
de
actually
l'autre
take them into that journey. Thank you.
campagne pour aller à la même solution qu'on voulait faire. Merci pour vos cours. Et je voulais parler avec autre point. Mais ils ont bien vu cette information dans l'écran. Et cette information rapidement pour mes mois de carbone. Il y a beaucoup de façons de le faire. Et on va bien continuer de mettre de l'information jusqu'à 2050. Et comment on va faire pour dédictionner le carbone et comment on va réduire. Et on va continuer. Et il y a aussi des informations sur l'Internet. Si vous voulez plus d'informations, il faut les m'appeler. Et merci beaucoup à vous.